Mask mandates are coming back. Wah, wah. Yeah. Now, I'm sure that you've heard that Alameda County in California, where Oakland is, has reinstated indoor mask mandates for everyone 2 years and older. They say it's because they're seeing an alarming rise in not only infections, but hospitalizations and deaths. And interestingly, they're no longer pushing vaccine mandates and shaming people into taking 1, 2, or even 3 doses, but they're instead back to the basics of wearing masks, which, as a side note, makes us wonder what happens to all the people who lost their jobs or who were smeared for refusing to take the shots when here we are now. So how much did it actually matter in stopping the spread and ending the pandemic? But back to Alameda County's mask mandate. Now, I know this is just one tiny ultra-liberal spot in the country, so you might be thinking, this won't affect me, we're done with masks. But before you throw them out to the landfill or ocean where billions of masks have now ended up, hear me out. For millions of us in this country, especially those of us living in big cities, which are typically blue, even in red states, you might find yourself covering your nose and mouth once again very soon. Take St. Louis, for example. Though the government isn't mandating masks, businesses and tourist attractions are. So you want to visit the Arch, you need to wear a mask, and other private businesses are requiring them as well. So the reason, it's the same one Alameda County states, that cases are rising at an alarming rate. Now, Alameda County's press release breaking the news of the mask rules stated, daily reported COVID-19 cases have exceeded the peak of last summer's Delta wave and are now approaching levels seen during the winter 2020-21 wave at comparable lab-reported testing levels. Reported cases are an underestimate of the total due to home testing and unidentified infections. Okay, and that's fair enough on that last point, because I think most people test at home and then never report their positive test to officials. But if they're sitting at home sick with COVID, what does it honestly matter? Throughout the entire beginning months of the pandemic, what justified the lockdowns and masks in the spring of 2020 was to flatten the curve in order to not overwhelm hospitals. We heard these phrases over and over. Images were strewn about showing sick people crowding hallways of hospitals hoping for care. We heard of endless talk of morgues filling up and refrigerated trucks being brought in. Arenas were turned into hospitals and enormous hospital ships were brought into ports. It was a scary time. But here we are with exponentially more spread than at the beginning of the pandemic. And yet we have yet to hear these sorts of stories of overwhelmed hospitals and semi-trucks full of death. Yet we're still mandating masks. Now, I want to bring up that there are many of these mask mandates rolling out. It's not just Alameda County where Oakland is. And interestingly, in Alameda County, Berkeley is exempt from this. So everywhere else has to wear a mask except Berkeley, California, because they have their own, they're in some sort of health bubble where they're exempt for whatever legal reasons. But other places are rolling them out now, like Sacramento Public Schools. They came back and said everyone's got to wear masks. Some universities are bringing them back. So, Robbie, what I'm really interested in hearing from you about is, as the libertarian in the group, now I know that you're very against, as I am, government mask mandates, but private businesses are now coming out, like in St. Louis, and they're implementing mask mandates. And I would imagine that if a bunch of businesses, if there was a high level of community spread, a bunch of businesses might say, okay, it's time to start putting masks on. Everyone's got to wear a mask if they want to come to my business. And other businesses around them feel almost shamed or guilted or pressured into following suit. Or maybe they just think, yeah, I guess that's the right thing to do. So you could find yourself in this weird situation. Like, is it better, do you think, when the government at least mandates the masks? Like if I go to Alameda County, right, I know now I'm going to have to wear a mask and carry it everywhere with me and put it on everywhere I go indoors. But if I go to St. Louis, for example, I don't know, right? One business might say you have to wear a mask. One might say you don't. So you're constantly like checking everywhere, every time you walk inside of a building. Which would you rather do?
The latter. I mean, I don't want to wear a mask, period. I'm not going to go into a business that requires me to wear a mask at this point, unless I have no other choice, I guess. I don't want to wear a mask. And I think that's what most people are. But look, if you have a uniquely, like there was a hyper liberal kind of grocery store near here, locally, I don't know how locally owned it is, whatever it is, that's very progressive. And yeah, they had a mask requirement in place even when the city in DC was no longer requiring it. I just stopped going there. That's fine. That we have to, we have to learn to get along. If you want a hyper masked experience, then you can segregate yourself into, businesses, organizations that cater to your insane antisocial insecurity. I don't want to be a part of it. So I would still rather let individuals and businesses decide than have it required at the level of government. Because when it's required at the level of government, I mean, they're requiring it past what the will of the people is clearly, because when the mask mandate gets lifted, then overwhelmingly, like 99% of businesses then say, okay, you don't have to wear it anymore. Sometimes they're not enforcing it, even though the government is telling them they have to enforce it because they don't want to enforce it.
Well, in general, I think the influence of think tanks on foreign policy is underrated and underappreciated. I mean, I think most Americans don't realize that when they read an op-ed by somebody at, Brookings or something, or a more obviously hawkish think tank like the American Enterprise Institute, that, there's an agenda there that the think tank by and large is serving. But I think what is happening here with the Institute for the Study of War is even subtler because, what they do is they provide what is purportedly just kind of information and analysis. And in this case, it's about the Ukraine war. And it is relied upon pretty uncritically by reporters for our most elite media. So I counted up how often the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, or the Washington Post has cited ISW just in the first 6 days of this month. And it was like 10 different articles. And it's been like that for pretty much the whole war. And the kind of influence that ISW exerts is subtle in this case. And I'm not even sure it's all that consequential. But what's alarming to me is that the reporters from these, our finest newspapers don't seem aware that this is a very hawkish outfit, right? I mean, it's, kind of neoconservative roots consistently advocating a militaristic foreign policy. And so I just wanted to call attention to it.
Robert, can you help give us a sense of the flavor of the kinds of analysis that are being cited in some of the articles from just this past month?
Yeah, as I said, it's subtle things. I mean, by and large, what ISW is doing is presenting the side of the war that the Ukrainian government wants to present, which is going to highlight Ukrainian successes and not Russian successes, and obscure Ukrainian setbacks. And I should say, look, my view is Russia invaded Ukraine like they're the bad guys. I do think Ukraine deserves some kind of support. What kind, and how much is another question. But still, whenever you're providing military support in a region this explosive and one of the combatants has nuclear weapons, you just want to see as clearly as possible. So what I'm like, I'll read you an example of this, and it may seem like almost nothing, but over time, these things add up. So here's a paragraph from the Wall Street Journal. Quote, Ukrainian forces in the south near Kherson conducted a successful counteroffensive over the weekend, according to the Institute for the Study of War. Though they were unlikely to retake more territory, they might force Russia to deploy more resources to the region. So they're using the word successful to describe an offensive that took no territory at all, based on the conjecture that maybe it'll have this welcome side effect. My point is just that they don't do that for Russia, right? And so over time, these little kinds of things add up. I think we're in a period now where people are starting to say, wait a second, things aren't going as well in the East for Ukraine as we had thought. And I think one reason is that our media has been, very reliant on ISW in particular. And there are a lot of other reasons. I just think this deserves more attention than it's getting.
I think I first recall hearing about this think tank. It must have been a decade ago when there was wasn't there some controversy with a researcher for them who had misrepresented having written a paper or graduated from somewhere, and it was a big controversy because her op-eds or her something had been cited in Senate discussions of this was the Libya intervention, I believe. Do you have any recollection of what I'm talking about?
I'm not sure. There was another controversy involving the president of the think tank, Kimberly Kagan, and her husband, Frederick Kagan, who got, during the Afghanistan war, a little closer to General Petraeus than a lot of people thought was appropriate. There were kind of some implicit subsidies and favors done by the Army for the Kagans, and the Washington Post wrote it up, and it looked like basically the Kagans could go around and say, look, we're in tight with General Petraeus. They could say that the funders get more donations. Petraeus could say to, in this case, Republicans especially, because the Kagans are most respected in Republican circles, he could say, look, the war is getting support from, these esteemed sources and so on. But, it's the thing is, even when there's no scandal, people just need to be aware that the people who opine on foreign policy, on op-ed pages, on cable TV shows, and come from think tanks are probably coming from think tanks that get defense contractor funding or funding from various other special interest groups that are intensely interested in a particular area and would like to see a militaristic policy in that area. It's really pervasive, and it's systemic.
So I guess this will be quite the spectacle. We'll be paying attention somewhat because it is news and should be covered, but perhaps not treated with this kind of either reverential or reality TV style. I mean, I don't know what there is even new to learn about it at this time. That's my criticism of this ongoing.
Never before seen footage. We'll see. Look, to the extent that this is supposed to be an optical bonanza where liberals are trying to remind people about the dangers of the Trump era and the threat to democracy and all of these kinds of things, why you would make the optics blunder of getting someone involved who is behind suppressing these really important Me Too stories that, again, liberals have made a really important prong of the moral case for why liberals should be in charge over conservatives.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Yeah, it's pretty baffling.
Over and over again, there is this impunity that these liberal networks take toward what they, not rules for thee and not for me. And they know how conservatives are going to latch on to having a figure like this involved. Why, liberals have made so many legitimate criticisms of kind of sexist culture that exists. Fox News obviously went through the ringer with the Ailes debacle and Megyn Kelly and all of that went down over there. This is a potential high road moment for liberals with respect to some of this Me Too stuff and also with respect to January 6th, which was and should have been a complete and total debacle for conservatives to have people storming the Capitol in their name as they claim to be the law and order party. However, now I suspect the story is going to be about the guy running it, producing it, having been the person who suppressed these really important stories from the Me Too era. Stories that even conservatives agree. This isn't one of these Me Too French cases. This is Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew, which is really a story about power, privilege, and elitism, not just about Me Too.
I think that's completely accurate. But beyond that, I just don't understand what the point is. This is not a mystery to unravel anymore. Like, we know what happened on January 6th. And I absolutely think Trump deserves a considerable amount of moral blame for saying things about the election for weeks that were not true, and then speaking to an angry, gathered crowd about those things, and then encouraging some sort of action to take place. Not the exact thing that happened, but it was a mob that got out of control after being riled up by Donald Trump. That is very clearly what happened. He should be blamed for that. They tried to hold him accountable for that. The vote failed. It's over. What more can you do? I don't think it was illegal conduct. I think it was unpresidential, and he should have not been able to be president. He should have been removed from office, but it didn't happen. So there's not more. It's like with the Mueller report or Russiagate. There's some new wrinkle we're going to find. We're going to learn, he was secretly being coordinated by Vladimir Putin or something. No, we already know the thing. It was a bad thing he did because he's an arrogant, careless person when he talks, and he had a core base of and then now even 95% or more of the people there didn't do anything wrong. They were just protesting as they're totally allowed to do. And some of the prosecutions of the people who did go in have gotten pretty out of hand. And I don't even want vicious, violent criminals held in solitary confinement for months. It's a cruel thing to do to people and should not be done and should not be done in these cases. But it's like we're not going to learn. We've solved the mystery.
They're
it's
still
not
trying
a
to make
mystery.
fetch happen, and that is a problem. But It's partly because Democrats can't come up with anything new. Now, Republicans do this too, obviously. They make a new boogeyman every week. Today it's groomers, tomorrow it's a trans person, and it's all a big stage show distraction from the fact that, as we talked about in another segment today, half of American families can't feed their children, gas prices are through the roof, and on and on and on.
And this is a stage show distraction from the fact that those things are happening under Democratic rule, and Democrats aren't doing anything about it.
That's correct. That's correct. But,
here we are.
Stay tuned.
Well, Thursday's hearings will come off the heels of 4 major arrests in connection to the riots. The Department of Justice has charged 4 men as part of the Proud Boys gang with seditious conspiracy. Former leader Enrique Tarrio and 3 other men face up to as many as 20 years in federal prison if convicted of seditious conspiracy. And to think that they very well might go to prison for long periods of time. For what? What was the cause that they thought? This is for the glory of a man who could not care less about them being in prison. Not going to do anything for them. So I feel there's almost a level of, I feel bad for them. They're so misled or deranged. But I feel bad for people who are. It is pathetic.
Let me ask you this, though, devil's advocate.
Yeah.
It is true that there does not seem to be, this issue is not moving the needle for anybody politically. Either you're very much offended by January 6th, you think it's the worst thing that's happened since 9/11, or maybe some people have said it's worse than 9/11, or you don't give a fig because you care about other things, some legitimate things or some illegitimate things. But why is that the case? Do you think that it is odd or says something about America that we do have these kind of bizarre images of people storming the Capitol and smoke billowing out, a month or so after the election? You had, people armed sitting at Nancy Pelosi's desk filing through papers. You had a woman shot and killed on the grounds. You had threats to hang the Vice President of the United States, Trump's Vice President, out in front of the White House. And it doesn't seem to move the needle at all. Do you think that, part of why the Democrats keep trying to foreground this issue is almost a disbelief that this is where the country is, that is not at all engaging as even a media spectacle at this point?
Look, I'm on the record for saying it was really bad. Obviously, it is not 9/11 or anything close. It was an embarrassing spectacle. It was it's hypocritical because Republicans always said, well, we would never riot. We would never do anything like this. Well, you absolutely did, you liars. You did exactly what you said you would never. I was assured during the month of rioting that took place, the summer in D.C., there was rioting that Republicans would never do this. Yeah, yes, you did. You absolutely did.
Well, there are.
So I put it, just to answer your question, I put it in a similar continuity of behavior from the rioting that engulfed my city for weeks over a course of a year with
this city?
Yes, this city. And that was happening in all sorts of other cities and many worse riots that took place. But I just saw what happened here firsthand, and it was really bad when the leftists came through and did all that, and then the right came through and did the same thing. And people should stop doing that. Stop storming buildings. Stop setting things on fire. Stop defacing public monuments. Stop. Just go home and don't do that.